Welcome to the Big Fellas Podcast, where we chop it up about all things past, present, and future about the game of basketball. Where facts, stats, and context reign supreme.
That is blasphemous!
Sometimes it gets crazy, but we always keep it real. Get ready to learn from players, coaches, and fans from all levels of the game and see the court in a brand new way. And now, fresh off the sidelines, here's your host, John Hartofilis.
What it do, fellas, and welcome to the Big Fellas Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, JH, coming to you from New York City, the mecca of basketball. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Audley Stevenson, Commissioner of the National Basketball League of Canada. In this episode, we spoke about what it's like being the commissioner of a professional sports league, how Audley got into podcasting before it was cool, and the growth of basketball in Canada. We've got a good one in store for you today, fellas. Episode number 29, Audley Stevenson, Commissioner of NBL Canada. Hey, Audley, what's going on?
I'm great, John. How are you?
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm really looking forward to this episode. It's going to be a lot of fun.
I appreciate you reaching out and having me on. It's always great to connect. I love podcasting. That's my history is deep in it. So any opportunity to chat about, the world around us, basketball, business, whatever. So thanks.
Awesome. So just to start, can you kind of give our listeners a little bit of a walkthrough on how you first got introduced to the game?
To the game of basketball? I grew up as a kid loving the sport. I think that's a common theme or a common story or beginnings, if you will, for a lot of people. I was a big Los Angeles Lakers fan, and loved the Magic show and Showtime Lakers and all that came along with that, and that was really my first real introduction by way of Magic Johnson and just that flashy style of play. And obviously you get hooked from there and you get deeper into the game. And I eventually developed an affinity for the New York Knicks and the Oakleys and the Ewings and John Stark era. I mean, that was I think that was an exciting time for New York Knicks basketball. They didn't have the level of success that a lot of Knicks fans would like them to by way of a championship, but they sure made hoops a lot of fun. And I mean, these current Knicks, I don't get into them because I don't think there's much to talk about, and they're not as entertaining as they once were. But nonetheless, that was kind of my history growing up with basketball. And of course, I played as a kid, not any great extensive long playing career, if you will. I was one of those kids that I was tough to coach, so to speak, and I thought I had all the answers as a young guy. So, I think I was more of a playground legend, if you will, but I still always had an affinity for the game. And as time had gone on, I do a lot of sort of public speaking events and talk to young people an awful lot. And one thing I say is, if there's something that you're really passionate about, something that you're really excited about, find ways to stay close to it as possible. And, the opportunities will present themselves in all sorts of ways that you never thought imaginable. And fast forward, here I am, the Deputy Commissioner of the National Basketball League of Canada, because I did just that.
Of course. And I mean, all that stuff's super interesting about how just like where it all started, where your love for the game started and how it turned into where you are now. I also, as a native New Yorker, I want to personally thank you for not going into detail about the present day Knicks and kind of focusing what you were saying on back in the 90s. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. I really appreciate it. Very, 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 very kind of you. From there, so once you grew up and your playground legend days were behind you, what got you into the whole radio space?
Well, I was always enjoyed communication, if you will. I mean, again, it's funny when you sort of stop and you sort of look back at all the things that you've done. I've done things. I've been a professional speaker. I've worked in public relations. I've written. I've authored a couple books. I mean, so all these things I've done in the realm of communications has always been there. And podcasting again. I was an extensive history in podcasting. In fact, I think my very first podcast was in 2000. I want to say 2007. And this is the time where, podcasts now are almost the equivalent of a business card. Well, back then it was totally different, and they weren't as popular. And we actually had a podcast. It was an NBA dedicated focus podcast that was actually we weren't exactly the first, probably the second credentialed basketball podcast by the Toronto Raptors at that time, which was a big deal, right? Because it was all brand new. And so that was for us where, you know, when I say us, I had a partner, but that's where we just kind of got started. And so for me, you know, it was always that communications component of who I am always existed. And I was happy I was able to find a way to marriage, you know, my love of hoops and basketball with that communications aspect.
Of course. So I also read up on you. I saw the whole thing about Audman Media. Can you kind of explain in a little bit of detail what that was all about? Because I wasn't really sure.
Well, it was a media platform that had created, I want to say it was probably shortly after that era of my very first podcast where I wanted, you know, you think of a modern day Bleacher Report, if you will. It was something along those lines where it was harvesting stories. And, you know, I had a collection of writers and contributors and content creators that we created content in that basketball space. And it was the Odd Man Media is what it was affectionately known as.
That's great. And then it's so cool that you started with all these media things to then eventually end up being the deputy commissioner of Sports League. That's awesome. So that whole NBL of Canada, number one, I want to know like how you got into that, but then also how you kind of climbed through the ranks to get to where you are now in that organization.
Yeah. You know, when you sort of look back, there never really is, and I'm sure if you talk to different people in terms of, you know, professionals in their careers, you know, their career is never really a straight line. You do this, you know, get directly there. That certainly wasn't the case for me at all. In 2011, which was the inaugural year of NBL Canada, that happened also to be the lockout year for the NBA. So here I am at that time. I've got this NBA podcast. All my content is around the NBA. This was at a time where content and access to players wasn't as easy as it is today, because, you know, everyone's in that social space where, you know, this is very early in that. And so the accessibility of whether it's stories or players, it was a lot tougher back then. And, you know, so we slightly pivoted, if you will, and turned our attentions to a Canadian basketball league that was just starting its inaugural season. And that's what sort of put it on the radar, on the map for me, so to speak. And it just sort of grew from there. And as time had gone on, I got more involved and deeper integrated into the league, and really start to work closely with a lot of the officials, the executives with the league. They obviously, you know, I had earned their trust. And they essentially that led to more opportunities. And throughout this entire time, while I was not unknowingly preparing myself for the role that I'm in now, I was gaining insight, gaining knowledge, learning from people who were doing the job that I, you know, didn't know I wanted to get into, because it just wasn't that awareness wasn't there for me. And you know, fast forward now 6 years into this. Someone kind of looked at me and said, "Hey, there's an opportunity. Have you thought about this? Because, you know, you've been here for a while. You know how we operate. Yeah, you've been on all aspects of our league. You know, what do you think?" And even in that moment, I was very much caught off guard, because that's not what I was looking for. That's not what I was after. I was very much appreciated that we had a league in Canada, Canadian Basketball League, that's providing opportunity for Canadian players. You know, we thought of it as our little mini NBA, and we were really proud of that. But now to say, hey, let's put you on the forefront and really give you an opportunity to be a part of our growth and development, totally caught me off guard. And I remember I had to take some time to think about it, because again, it was just not what I was expecting. And I remember saying, you know, it was a Friday. You know, I got the call and I was talking, and I said, you know, give me the weekend to think about it. And, you know, I hung up the phone and I was like, yeah, I don't need the weekend. Come on, you know, it's a no-brainer. And so, but I still waited till Monday, and I called back and took the role, and we went, and the rest is history.
So that's so cool. And everything of having this league in Canada is just awesome, especially considering, obviously touch on the Toronto Raptors. I went to the Eastern Conference Finals, games 3 and 4 against the Milwaukee Bucks as you can see from behind me. I'm a Greek American, big Giannis fan. Obviously it didn't go the way I had hoped at the time, but I did get to see some fantastic basketball. And I mean, their championship run was something, you know, unbelievable. What do you think that championship, or just that year, or the energy, because the energy in that building was surreal. I'd never been in an arena that crazy. obviously you guys always had the passionate fans, but now you guys had something to kind of lean on as to, okay, we won a championship in that league. What was it like for the country in of itself? And then what is the NBL kind of trying to kind of just feed off of that momentum in just terms of how basketball is growing in Canada?
Well, for running sort of on the inside, the growth of basketball, we've always seen it coming. It's always something that we've always, we're in Canada, which is primarily known as a hockey country. And, I can tell you that there are a pool of diehard basketball fans that are waiting for the day where basketball surpasses hockey. And we're not that far off from it when you sort of look at how things have been gone on. So for many fans, it's like, yeah, we knew this was coming. We're not surprised, right? If you look at how the game has been growing and developing, you're looking at the number of players that are playing in the NBA, Canadian players. Look at the national team, how more competitive it's become, how now it's cooler all of a sudden to play for your national team, whereas at the time there was, I'm not really sure I want to take the summer off and train. I mean, guys are jumping up saying, hey, I want to represent my country. So all of these things have been slowly bubbling and percolating, and it only made sense. When they won the championship, and I even take a step back even before, the Raptors became a championship team. If you sort of look over the last, you take the last 10 years, let's say, as an example, the Toronto Raptors have been a competitive team in the Eastern Conference and have, I want to say, a 7 or 8 year stretch of playoff appearances where they have been always, somewhere at the table, so to speak. And I even think if you're a young player, let's say you're 10 years old at the time, and all of a sudden you're watching the Raptors going to the playoffs year after year after year after year. That's all you know. You know that you've got a perennial playoff team. So that championship is only the natural progression, the natural step, if you will. Mind you, it's a very different looking team that won the championship than years prior. Obviously, the addition of Kawhi will do a lot to change the makeup of your team. But the team has always been competitive. Fans were always excited about the team and their prospects. Jurassic Park, the bigger area outside, the Scotiabank Arena. I mean, get 10,000 people packed out there to watch a game on a big screen shows you the excitement and the exuberance that fans have for the team. So, it was always there, and those of us knew, and it was great to get everyone else on board. The whole country rallied around the team, which was fantastic. And to see this growth and development of the game is wonderful. So from National Basketball League of Canada's perspective, we've taken a very different approach in terms of growing the game. We're very grassroots in terms of where we play. We're not in big metropolitan cities like Toronto, very much smaller communities where, on a Saturday night, there's only one place to be, and it's an NBL game. Because, that's where you'll find the best action. So we've taken a very much different grassroots approach, supportive of the Raptors, obviously, and all that they've done and all they have done to grow the game. And we, obviously, we want to be a part of that wave as the game continues to grow. But couldn't be more prouder of what the team accomplished, and as an organization, what they continue to do year in and year out.
Wow, that's just fantastic. I didn't understand this until I was actually there. Once I was in the seat in that arena, it wasn't just a city or a state. It was like there was a country in that building, and there was a country in Scotiabank Arena, and it was really something to be around. I mean, I mean, as a Knicks fan, I've never seen playoff atmosphere, but that was like super playoff atmosphere. That was incredible. I always make the joke to everyone that asks, because for Game 4, we had tickets to Game 4, but we went and went to Jurassic Park. We got free Drake shirts. They were throwing the NBA and TNT came out. Shaq and all those guys were in the thing. Yep. And I look at my friend. I'm like, dude, do we really have to go inside and watch the game? Because like, I wanted to stay out there. I was like, dude, we paid all this. We paid all this money. We have to go inside. But oh my god, there was so much energy. The fun outside was incredible. So it's always it's a funny regret of mine to like I regret buying tickets to a great basketball game because just outside it was free and it was so much fun. So
they put in a lot of effort. The organization put in a tremendous amount of effort to creating that experience outside. So I'm not at all surprised to hear you felt the way you did, because again, the efforts going into create that fan experience is tremendous. So yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yep, definitely. It's such a fun, because you'll never hear me say again, I regret going to a basketball. I regret walking into a basketball arena. But that time I did. I was in that seat like, man, it must be so much fun outside. It's funny.
That's awesome.
So obviously fans in the States really don't know as much about the NBL, being that it's a Canadian league, but what ways is the NBL trying to expand, whether it's to just, obviously we've already spoken a little bit of touched on growing the game in Canada, but also kind of just growing the fan base and kind of growing the league that way. What are those steps that the league's taking in that direction?
Yeah. I mean, it very much goes back to starting with our communities. I think that's a starting point. All of our teams have strong connections, not only with just the communities but local businesses, because that's where you get your real support from, and that's really the starting point from a growth standpoint. So certainly that, and then beyond our existing communities, growing the online presence. We established just last season, we established our own sort of, it's a pay-per-view platform, NBLC Live. And there was a huge amount of resources and dollars invested into improving our live stream quality broadcast. Obviously, again, when we talk about that viewing experience or that event experience, being able to watch a game, a quality game, is important. So certainly the way the league presents itself is important. Being visible, being recognized. Sadly we were like the rest of the world, impacted by COVID-19 and having to suspend and eventually cancel the season. But we felt very good about where we were. Last year was our 9th season. We're going into our 10th next year, and we're really excited about that. But yeah, when we talk about growing the game, and it really starts with our fan base, creating positive experience, creating a positive atmosphere, we feel very confident. I've always felt confident about our level of play. I oftentimes I'll challenge people: come with me to a game and not enjoy yourself. I dare you, right? It's always top quality excitement, quality basketball, and we're just pleased at what we have and what we've created and where we're going.
I love that. I dare you to be bored. You can't do it. I'll bet you any amount of money you have a smile on your face when we leave. That's funny. That's good.
It hasn't happened yet. I can guarantee you that. I've challenged quite a few people.
And you definitely must get a lot of pushback. Like, like it's a small league, but then you go and the experience is just something else, and you love it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was gonna ask you about that when you brought up the whole thing about live stream. That must have been huge, especially with the pandemic. To just that must perfect timing for you to have invested all that money in before it happened to be prepared for when it has. What's it looking like for next season in terms of how you guys are going to have to approach that, especially because obviously things are a lot different in Canada as opposed to the US, but how you guys are going to have to approach that?
Well, a lot just depends on sort of where we land at and the timing of things. So we haven't made any definitive decisions in terms of what next year will look like, because there's just a lot of outstanding matters that need to be resolved. We're talking about a vaccine. We're talking about, whether it be social distancing. We're talking about whether it be less fans in the arena. There's all sorts of things that are unknowns right now. So we've been very clear that we're not trying to make any decisions right now. We don't necessarily have to make any decisions right now. And I think more than anything else, so there's just a lot of things going on in the world that probably take a bit more precedent than basketball in this exact moment. And we recognize that. And I think it's fair to allow some of these things to get worked through. And then we'll get back to playing a game of basketball. We're definitely eager, we want to, but sort of recognizing the situation, a lot of it is over and above our control.
Of course. Just to wrap up, I'm just curious in terms of the future outlook of the league. What would be, in terms of if everything were to go right, let's say, like the pandemic excluded, because those are unprecedented circumstances that no one can predict. What would be the goal? Because you've also had 10 years of where you're going to your 10th season of success. What do you expect? It'd be a positive to see the NBL, and it's realistic to see them in 2030, in 10 years from now. What does that look like to you?
Well, I think for us, as much as we represent Canada, there's still, we're a big country, and there's lots of communities that we can exist. Right now, we're a 10-team league at present, and we're primarily sort of in the central and eastern part of the country. There's all of Western Canada, and there's lots of basketball fans. You talk about that Vancouver area, Saskatchewan. Those provinces. So there's lots of room for us to grow, and having 20 or 30 teams is very realistic for a country our size and makeup. So certainly that's some lofty, ambitious goals, and ones that we would embrace. But absolutely, growth and being more of a presence and more teams. Absolutely, those are all things that fall within our plan. So when we talk about expansion, that's exactly what we're looking at.
That's great. It's definitely something I'm going to keep my eye on because, I mean, you always read up on the ABA and the NBA and then that whole 1960s, 1970s, how they had to grow the league. And now they're at a point after, everyone talks about the 80s and the finals being on tape delay and Magic and Bird and how that changed the league. And it's so interesting to hear about, but it's nice to watch it happen in front of you. And obviously I never got the chance to do that. So I'm really hopeful that I get to see some really cool things over there with the NBL. So
yeah, I mean that absolutely is the plan, and again, with all those things, we talk about growth, expansion, growing, corporate partners, and expanding that base as well, and getting more people on board, and to help support and grow our league. So yeah, there's lots of positive things that are on the horizon, and lots of potential. I can remember in year one, there were a lot of pundits that didn't think that we would last 3 seasons. And then it became, well, you won't make it to year 5, and now we don't even hear those predictions anymore because we're now going into year number 10, and still, we feel really, really good about what we're doing and excited at the same time.
The NBL is here to stay. Audley, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. We'll definitely keep in touch, and thank you so much for coming on.
Appreciate it, John. Thank you, and reach out anytime.
Thanks for listening to the Big Fellas Podcast. Check us out on all major social media platforms at Big Fellas Pod to join the chop up. You can also listen to us on every podcast platform on the planet. Stay tuned for the next episode, Big Fellas.